Our thanks to the Augsburg Choir for singing and to Jim Rohde, who is the director, the interim director for this semester. Jim is an Augsburg grad of the 70s, and he is the director at the University of North Dakota and is on sabbatical this semester. I'm sure you are all aware of the convocation tomorrow at 10:30, where we will celebrate the 80th birthday of Leland Saturn with 150 some singers. Let us begin with prayer. Gracious God, we give thanks for the many good things that surround us. You shower us with the blessings of this day, of this school, and of this family we call Augsburg. These days we celebrate the past, but also look to the future, knowing that what has been and is to come comes from you alone. Move us now to respond to your graciousness, that your name be glorified, your people live in peace, and your intentions for this world be fulfilled. In Christ's name we pray as we begin this convocation. Amen.
Good morning and welcome to all of you. It's always a pleasure to welcome any group to campus, but it's especially true of welcoming alumni. And especially today to join in recognizing those chosen by their colleagues and peers to represent the whole of the family as distinguished alumni. I'd also like to welcome the students, current students who have come to the convocation. This is an absolutely grand way to get a deeper understanding of your school. These students will be walking out probably if we run long. In fact, I told Cliff already, if he goes over 20 minutes, I come up and ask them to. He won't do that. I assure you, if they do walk out, it's not because they are bored or don't like what's going on, but they have to go to class. It's customary to begin the program by recognizing distinguished alumni who have been chosen in previous years. I always feel that this is something of a risk, however, because this year's inductees may actually see what the group is like and that they're supposed to be joining and have second thoughts. We have a number of persons who have indicated they would be here. We think some have been held up by rain, but I would like to read the current list. And will you stand and remain standing until the whole group is up? Oletta Wald. Is Oletta here? Thank you. Abner Batalden. Phil Helland. I saw Phil over there. Henry Staub. Thank you. Richard Pouts. Dick. Thank you. Gertrude Mertstrummen, pardon me. Gertrude Hognander. Jerry Thorson, Earl Lanus, come from California, there he is. Gladys Ling, Gloria Berntveit Nelson, George Nelson, Maybeth Sowry Gilstrom, William Halverson, Lee Saturn, happy birthday. Joel Torstenson, Jerry Formo, Clarice Staff, Carl Krislock, Leola Dyrud Furman, J. Vernon Jensen, Emil Fossen, Bessie Hughes, Shelby Gimsey Andress. Now I'm sure there are some people who have come. Are there other distinguished alums whose names have not been read? Thank you. Let's greet all these people. Thank you. Thank you. Now to begin the presentations, I would like to call on Beverly Omdahl Nelson, class of 1955.
Thank you. I was fine until I saw all these people standing up out there. Now I'm scared. Honored guests, Augie's friends. Several weeks ago, I found an item in the 13 Towns, which is the weekly newspaper from Fosston, Minnesota, which is my hometown. And this is the town where Cliff Johnson came to serve Kingle Lutheran Church in the 40s and 50s. This was 40 years ago, August 21st, 1953. One of the items was 57 new members joined Kingle Lutheran Church. That was pretty good for about a church of 400 or so. But this item, hundreds of members and friends of the Kingle Lutheran Church filled the church to overflowing, and approximately 200 sat outside in folding chairs to hear the final sermon of Reverend C.M. Johnson. I'm glad they left in August and not in the winter, because those metal folding chairs would have been a little bit cold. The crowd which gathered to say goodbye to the Johnsons was maybe not unusual for a small parish, but it was symbolic of the love that we had for them. Ruth, too, was a friend to all the people and friendly to everybody. You've read all of Cliff's long history with Augsburg. Not long in the sense that it took him longer to get educated than others, but he began with the academy, graduated from the academy, from the college and from the seminary. Many years, were spent in study there. Then later on 2 occasions, he became part of the staff. 67 years totally of his life have been associated with Augsburg College. And he just told me that that's over half the life of the college. That's a good record. I have a lot of memories, and I can only share a few of them. Cliff lived Augsburg. We had Luther League and Mission Society people out. We had choirs, we had quartets, we had speakers, and whenever an Augie grad came to teach in Boston, we always got them to come to Kingo, of course. We had to know about Augsburg. Through the years, people have asked me, how did you know so much about a small school way down in Minneapolis? Well, the answer is, of course, that pastors like Cliff were there who had a deep faith in Augsburg College. Someone from our church suggested the nickname Stumpy, which was whispered about sometimes because we didn't want to seem disrespectful. Well, we found out years later that Stumpy was his Augsburg name. And a few years ago, I was at homecoming and I heard one of his classmates call him that. And today, this morning, I heard somebody greet him with that. So I guess we wouldn't have been out of line if we'd said it, but it wouldn't have been very nice. Because I was young then, I especially remember how he supported and encouraged the youth in our congregation and in the community. And he created leadership opportunities for us and always saw to that we got the best possible training. The man never accepted an excuse if you wanted to get out of doing something either. If it was Bible camp time or a Luther League convention or a meeting somewhere and we'd say, oh, I can't get there, he'd say, we're taking a bus, or I'll come bring you there, or I'll come and get you. Or if we'd say, I really haven't got the money right now, he'd find sponsors so that they could help out. I wonder if he knew those experiences were going to be life-changing for many of us. I thank God and I thank Cliff for this stubborn Norwegian trait that he possesses. Another trait Cliff possesses is enthusiasm. Several of the people who I asked to send letters for the nomination mentioned this. They were kind enough to send me copies, some of them, of the letters that they sent. And in those letters, many people mentioned his enthusiasm. I'd like to say that this too is a Norwegian trait. I don't know. I'm happy that a man who has spent many years as a regular parish pastor, whose deep love for Augsburg influenced so many people, has been selected for this honor. Cliff, you also made it possible for me to say a few words in the Augsburg chapel, which my Augie contemporaries are never going to believe. I better quit now so he can talk. Cliff, thanks for your life, and congratulations.
I'd like to read the citation. I'll read three that are just alike, just changing the names so perhaps you can memorize them. They're the same. Augsburg College Distinguished Alumnus Citation. Clifford M. Johnson, class of 1934. For significant achievement in vocation, for outstanding contribution to church and community, and for a life that exemplifies the purpose and mission of Augsburg College. Presented by the Board of Regents and the Alumni Association of Augsburg College, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and signed by the President. There you go. There you go.
President Anderson, Bev Nilsson, distinguished alumni, and members of the Augsburg community. It is with humility and with gratitude that I am here this morning to accept the Distinguished Alumni Award. Having received a Distinguished Service Award in 1976, I had no further thoughts of any additional recognition being given to me by my alma mater. And so when the letter arrived a few weeks ago notifying me of this award, I must say I was completely surprised because I never believed it would happen. When I learned a little later that it was Beverly Amdal Nilsson, who had nominated me, who had been a Luther Leaguer of mine and church member in Foster, Minnesota, was the one who had made the nomination. I was all the more impressed. And so I'm grateful to you, Bev, for this undeserved favor and for this introduction that she gave to me. I was wondering who she was talking about. As all Lutheran sermons usually have 3 points, and I usually tried to do that when I was in the preaching business. So my response today also has 3 parts, even though it's not a sermon. First of all, I would like to reminisce a little bit about my 67 years here at Augsburg. Secondly, I would like to say something about the contributions that Augsburg has made to my life. And then in closing, I'd like to say a few words about my hope for the future of this college. As Beverly said, it was 67 years ago last month that I first set foot on the Augsburg campus. My dad, who had graduated from the academy in 1903, wanted his son to do likewise. And so a 15-year-old, naive country boy who had never been away from home was brought to the Augsburg campus. In the minds of my parents, Augsburg was considered to be a safe place, morally, intellectually, and spiritually for their oldest child. The other choice would have been for me to live in Northfield and go to the Northfield High School, and my folks thought that would be a little risky and a little inadvisable for a 15-year-old. But wait, little did they know. Little did they know that at Augsburg, a student is not immune and exempt from the temptations and the pitfalls that abound in the world. Living in a dormitory, Old North Hall, which some of you may remember, with college and seminary students was quite a unique experience. And this naive country boy matured in a hurry. Furthermore, the association with many fine students, the instruction by great teachers, and the many opportunities provided to participate in extracurricular activities proved to be an adequate preparation for college, later for seminary, as well as for a rewarding and happy life. In the fall of 1930 came the great invasion to Augsburg of the freshman class totaling 96 students, the largest class ever enrolled at Augsburg as of that date. It was my privilege and honor to be the president of that class. On October 10th, the class was subjected to the Board of Correction by the sophomore class in the Battle of Murphy Square during the homecoming festivities. Hoping to, I'm happy to report that the sophomores suffered a drastic defeat. The outstanding deed of valor was the capture of a rooster by Ruth Osterhus, a member of our freshman class. I do regret to say that our class dwindled year by year in number, and so when we graduated on June 6, 1934, there were only 36 of us out of 96 who received their diplomas. Financially, both the college and the students had a tough time making both ends meet during those years. The nation was suffering from drought, from dust storms, and from Russian thistles. Since the majority of the students came from the rural areas, the majority of us worked at a variety of jobs since financial aid at that time was unknown. I had the good fortune of working in a library during my 4 years in college, and the going rate was 25 cents an hour. I recall on one cold winter day in chapel, an appeal was made for an offering, so a load of coal could be bought to heat the buildings. The campus during my student years was limited to 1 square block, as some of you remember. All of my classes during the academy, the college, and the seminary were held in what we then considered to be New Maine. Now it is Old Maine. What a thrill it has been for me to be involved and have had a part in seeing one building after another being erected on this campus to accommodate the about 3,000 students who are enrolled here this year. The maximum number of students during my years here was about 300, as far as I remember. Now, what are some of the contributions that Augsburg has made to my life? I'd like to give expression of what that affiliation has meant to me as a student, as a staff member on 2 different occasions, and as a regent for a few years, and as an alumnus. I like to think of this affiliation with Augsburg as a family relationship, where love and caring and nurture and service has been my experience from the very first day that I set foot on this campus. The majority of the teachers and professors I had were committed men and women who not only inspired their students to pursue knowledge, but faculty who cared about us, made us feel important, and were ready at all times to be of help and counsel when it was needed. Secondly, the centrality of the gospel at this college, with its message of redemption and freedom, has been a source of inspiration, motivation, and satisfaction. And this is what led me to enter the Christian ministry, where I now have had the privilege to serve for 54 years. Thirdly, these years have provided the opportunity to know hundreds, and I suppose even thousands, of true and lasting friends who have had a great influence on my life. Among these are, first of all, my beloved wife, my helpmate and private nurse, who I met here at Augsburg during my seminary days, and to whom I have been married now for 54 years. I'd like to have Ruth stand. In my years in the parish ministry as a staff person here at Augsburg, and later as a associate director in the division for college education of the American Lutheran Church, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet just hundreds of administrators, faculty members, and students of both church colleges and state institutions of learning, as well as many great leaders in the church at large. And the education that I received here at Augsburg, and the many opportunities for service which since graduation have provided for me a very fulfilling and rewarding life. Above all, I'm grateful to my Lord, who became a living reality for me during my student years and who has blessed me with his grace all these years. Not only did I graduate from Augsburg, but I'd like to mention here this morning that there were several members of my family who have graduated, including my sister Alice, my brother Lester, who received a Distinguished Alumni Award in 1971, and our daughter Ellen and her husband Dale Strom, also a niece and a nephew, and another brother, Alvin, and 2 sisters-in-laws have also attended Augsburg, and my wife's dad and 2 of her brothers graduated from Augsburg Seminary. So you see, our family has had quite a history here at the institution. Now, finally, a word of my hope for Augsburg's future. As I again express gratitude to all who have enriched my life, permit me to express a few thoughts on my hopes and dreams for this institution. First and foremost, I pray that Augsburg will always be a college of the church. This has been true during its entire history now of nearly 125 years, and I pray that it may continue to be so in the future. As such, I believe the Church College is a Christian community with a mission, a particular kind of mission. And President Anderson, in a letter to Bishop Chilsham last year, said it so well when he wrote, and I quote, "Augsburg is not church-related, not affiliated with the church, not involved in a covenant relationship or a statement of understanding with the church. Augsburg is the church in its educational mission on Riverside Avenue," end of quotation. I believe Augsburg must be the church living on the frontiers of culture with a mission of preparing men and women to live in a world like ours and providing for the liberation of the mind so that human beings may develop their full potential and be prepared for a life of service. And so it is my hope and prayer that Augsburg will continue to prepare persons who will seek to develop the common good for all peoples, irregardless of race, color, or creed. To develop persons whose motivation and goal is not self, but rather the giving of self for others. I do not want, nor do I expect, Augsburg to be the same as it was in my student days, since a church college that lives in the past has not discovered its mission for the present or for the future. In closing, I want to say that I am proud and grateful to be a graduate of Augsburg College. I will continue to do whatever I can to be as supportive of its academic program, of its development efforts, and in the recruitment of students. I wish only the best for this great college as it continues to be a college of the church, rooted in the relationship it has to the Christian community and in its mission to the world. Thank you.
President Anderson, distinguished alumni, friends of Augsburg. A young girl named Anne found a $5 bill tucked away between the pages of an old pamphlet. The picture of Abraham Lincoln, along with the number 5 on any piece of paper, was scarcely seen in the days of the drought, especially in the hands of a young child. Anne was allowed to keep that $5 and immediately began to wonder how she would spend that. The Sears Roebuck catalog beckoned. But then she wondered if that was the best use of her money. I begin to quote, "On the campus of Augsburg College, Henry opened the envelope that Anne had given him moments before. In it he found the crisp $5 bill. He looked up. Just now the family had driven away in the old familiar car. Finally he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor of the big yellow dormitory, and he was alone in his room. Suddenly he felt weak. It couldn't have been the effort of the climb. He sank into a chair. How could she do it?" The story and quote come from a book entitled Julia's Children, written by a person whom I am delighted to introduce to you today on this day of distinguished alumni at Augsburg College. Margaret Crislock Gilseth is much like the Anne character of her book, a book which explores the life of a Norwegian immigrant family, and which, by the way, is available in the Augsburg bookstore today. Margaret has chosen to give of herself as Anne chose to give. And Margaret's giving has gone far beyond pictures of dead presidents with numbers on green pieces of paper. Margaret Gilseth has given of her spirit and of her essence. Margaret was born and raised in the setting of her book, Julia's Children, Wanamingo, Minnesota, graduated from Augsburg College in 1940, and earned a master's in Christian education from the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago. She is married to an entirely devoted and supportive husband, Walt, and together they are doting parents and grandparents of Stephen and his family. Evident in her choice of occupations, teaching, is Margaret's clear goal to be of service to her community and to her world with the gifts that God has given to her. Her teaching has influenced countless students in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Washington, including one student who became the youngest editor of the Los Angeles Times and who credits Margaret with instilling in him a love of language. But perhaps the most defining years of Margaret's professional benevolence are the 5 years that she and Walt spent as missionaries in Tanzania, where she worked on religious curriculum. Margaret still speaks wistfully of those years and is grateful to God for the opportunity to give her figurative $5 bill to some other part of God's creation. She and Walt have kept that missionary impulse alive in their lives through a project of the Lions International, and have taken 5 trips to third world countries delivering eyeglasses to people sorely in need. She has given herself to her church and community with an unflagging persistence. She has found herself involved in political issues, which by nature become faith issues as well. Through her books, 2 published, soon 2 to be published, Margaret is able to give herself to an even wider audience. While I might hope for some more time to detail more specifically Margaret's service to all with whom she comes in contact and of her resolute support of Augsburg College, I simply end with an honor that is mine, an honor shared by many of you, and that is to call with Margaret Augsburg College our alma mater, a college that yet raises up people in the old motto, education for service. I am pleased to present for the award of Distinguished Alumna of Augsburg College, Margaret Krislak Gilseth.
I read the citation: Augsburg College, Distinguished Alumna Citation, Margaret Krislak Gilseth, Class of 1940, for significant achievement in vocation, for outstanding contribution to church and community, and for a life that exemplifies the purpose and mission of Augsburg College. Presented by the Board of Regents and the Alumni Association of Augsburg College, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Dr. Anderson, alumni, family, and friends. I am overwhelmed by what has happened today, and this is indeed a special day for me. Thanks to Norman Wall for that detailed introduction. I scarcely realized that he was talking about me. And I wish to thank my husband, Walter, and my son, Stephen, for their support and encouragement through all of these years. In making my response, I wish to take you back in time to the Augsburg that I knew. The year 1937, with the help of the Augsburgian of that year. First, we meet up with Dr. George Sverdrup, an impressive picture, the college president. I cherish a memory of him. When I returned as a sophomore, Dr. Sverdrup took me aside. My mother had passed away, and he took me aside and gave me comfort. In those days, grieving was considered a weakness, and we were supposed to be stoic and brave in the face of loss. But here was Dr. Sverdrup giving me comfort. And my stereotype of a college president away in an office, sitting in a large leather chair, faded. Dr. Sverdrup was a warm, loving person, and he was out among the students. That was September. In November of that same year, Dr. Sverdrup passed away, and we were all had a reason to grieve that great loss. As I turn the pages of Faculty Faces, I rest for a moment on Gerda Mortensen, Dean of Women. She was a source of strength for women students. She knew us all by name and our situations in those Depression years. She was responsible for finding me a board and room as a domestic when I doubted whether I could return to school at all. "Come, let us go out and see this woman," she said, as she invited me to go along as she was inspecting one of these homes that had called the Employment Bureau. "If this doesn't work out for you, don't hesitate to call me," she said. And this job kept me in school for another year. As I continue looking over the faculty of those years, there is much I could say about those who taught me. I stopped at Bernard Christensen. By his picture, he had signed an autograph and this statement, "Follow the gleam." That was characteristic of Dr. Christensen. As a freshman, I took a required course from him entitled Orientation. Now, I don't remember much about the content of that course after all these years, but I do remember the depth and breadth of his vision. We wrote a paper for his class, and when mine was returned to me, there was a comment in the margin, "The beginning of a truly integrated life." I pondered this as a freshman. How was I to understand it? It has followed me throughout my various life experiences. Integrated life, understanding this concept has taken a lifetime. Pictures of clubs and societies gave me pause. In those days, seminarians were among us, namely the Concordia Society, as I remember them now, all male. Seminary was not an option for women in those days. If it had been, I very likely would have pursued it. My opportunity came for this 2 decades later, as I received my master's degree from the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago in connection with mission study. Then there was the Norris Club. I counted 40 members. I found peers at Augsburg who embraced their heritage and studied the language, even as I did. This reinforced me. Many years later, I was to write about Norwegian immigrants in Julia's Children. I still teach Norwegian in the community education program in Rochester. I found a page well surrounded by autographs. It was the Writers' Club. As a child, I had dreamed of becoming a writer. It had been my goal in high school to go to Augsburg and to belong to the Writers' Club, as I had seen its publication, The Dial. As a freshman, I roomed with a senior in Morton Hall, a Writers' Club member, and she became my mentor. Having shared my poetry with her, she immediately brought it to a meeting and advocated that I be accepted in the club even if I was only a freshman. I was taken in and I was ecstatic. As I continued turning pages, another impressive picture, Henry P. Opseth, Director of Music. I wouldn't have missed my experience with him and my one season with the Augsburg Choir. This humble and almost inarticulate man had a talent for drawing forth feelings we scarcely knew that we had and weaving them into anthems as we ever sang them. How could I not take music courses? Before I graduated, I managed a music minor. Idling back through the book, my eyes fell upon the sketch of the main building. Now, what you call Old Main. We had another Old Main in those days. What I remember about this building was the chapel. Actually, a pretty small room as you see it now, put to other use. At chapel time, it quickly filled to standing room only as we sang the opening hymn. What a thrill to be part of that singing day after day. Often we broke into harmony, alto, tenor, bass. I was coming to realize then the power and majesty of our hymnology. Later, I was privileged to hear this singing in another chapel halfway around the world in Tanzania, Africa. It was at the Morongo Teacher Training College, where singing was pure pleasure. There, too, the students broke into harmony. The chapel was full of basses. I directed the choir there. Nothing could have been more rewarding. I was happy for what I had experienced at Augsburg. It prepared me for this. Augsburg was truly a family when I attended in those early days, the Depression years. I gained acceptance as never before, and I was totally at home. Today, as I stand here, I feel confident that Augsburg has been a home to countless students since that early time. The values held dear since the school's founding, as I see it, are still among us. We are seeking the integrated life and endeavoring to follow the gleam, as our beloved Dr. Bernard Christensen put it to me when I was only 18.
In the fall of 1965, John Mark Stensvag and I simultaneously arrived on the Augsburg campus, he as a freshman and I as a faculty symbol that the college was about to create a new department, a department of political science. By 1969, when he graduated with his major in political science and headed east to Harvard Law School, we who remained were aware that we had been blessed with a superb beginning. That Augsburg College today recognizes Professor Stensvag as a distinguished alumnus is, in my judgment, less an honor that we bestow upon him than it is a thank you to him for the honor that he reflects back on Augsburg through his already remarkable career as scholar, teacher, Christian, and citizen. Most full-time law school students graduate in 3 years. It took John Mark 5. As a responsible, conscientious objector to military methods of resolving world problems, after his first year in law school, He married Nancy, and they headed west from Cambridge for 2 years of alternate service, first in healthcare and later in legal aid. But he wasn't forgotten at Harvard. When he returned, he became editor of the Harvard Law Review and graduated magna cum laude. After law school, working with judges and later with the Minnesota Attorney General's office in cases involving environmental law, Stensvag's expertise grew. Soon, Vanderbilt University asked him to join its law faculty and to create a new program of environmental law. Stensvag was now embarking on the career that seemed to us to be destined for him. He would become a professor in a field made to order for the fulfillment of the Augsburg goal of education for service. Now, many of us have learned about Stensvag's teaching awards. The 1985 Paul J. Hartman Award for Excellence in Teaching when he was at Vanderbilt, and Iowa's first collegiate teaching award 4 years later for his work at the University of Iowa Law School. We know something about his scholarly publications, his membership upon an advisory committee to the Iowa Supreme Court, his community and church volunteer work, and we are impressed. But we're not in the least surprised. And the reason so many of us are not surprised is that we knew him as an undergraduate student at Augsburg. The John Mark Stensvag that I knew in the 1960s was characterized by integrity, diligence, discipline, Christian commitment, kindness, and lots of fun. This was the student who always had his work done with distinction. So he had time to relax afterward. He even had time to do door-to-door political work for a professor engaged in a losing campaign for the state legislature. He was a student who could stand alone when outvoted on a student faculty committee on what to do about the attendance in chapel. When he was outvoted, he would take the position that he considered responsible, and he could disagree without becoming disagreeable, without losing that wonderful smile. He was a student who was kind and considerate to classmates, to faculty, and even to his own family. The only failure I remember from John Mark's undergraduate days is when he ran for student body president and lost. At least he wants us to think that he lost, but that loss may have been planned. It may be an example of sibling deference. You see, just a few years later, his younger brother, Saul Stensvag, was elected Augsburg student body president. Please greet Professor John Stensvag, distinguished alumnus of Augsburg College.
Read the citation, Augsburg College, Distinguished Alumnus Citation for John Mark Stensvag, Class of 1969. For significant achievement in vocation, for outstanding contribution to church and community, and for a life that exemplifies the purpose and mission of Augsburg College. Presented by the Board of Regents and the Alumni Association of Augsburg College, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson and Dr. Stenchel. Most of us go through life without thinking very much about poetry. That's certainly been true for me. But this morning's ceremony, or more precisely my small part in them, has caused me to think quite a bit about poems. Not just any poems, mind you. The poems I have in mind, the poems I can't get out of my mind, are poems to the moon. Think about it. There must be countless poems about the moon. Curiously, these moon poems praise an attribute that does not inhere in the object of their praise, light. The moon, as we know, has no light of its own. At best, it reflects light from another source. Yet poet after poet has heaped praise on the moon, extolling its reflections, of another's light. One wonders how the moon feels about all of this fuss. This imagery haunts me today because the citation that you've so kindly given me, Dr. Anderson, and the nice words that you've spoken, Dr. Stenchel, are, it seems to me, poems to the moon. The light you honor by these acts is not in me, it's not from me. The praise is misplaced. My dad used to say, remember who you are. Those familiar words mean something different today. His voice speaks to me this morning saying, remember what you are not. Friends, I'm not the light that we celebrate here. But what then should be the object of our celebration? If our lives are given meaning, and give meaning because they reflect light, where does this light come from? For many of us who had the good fortune to study at Augsburg College, the source of this light has been our college teachers. Those of you who are yourselves alumni know that I speak the truth. When this place was our home, Augsburg blazed with the light of its teachers. Today, that light is reflected wherever Augsburg alumni live and serve. It is reflected in the lives of small business owners and workers, large business executives and employees, ministers of the gospel at home and missionaries in far-off lands, teachers of parenting skills and teachers of music, counselors of those who are in trouble with the law, and counselors of those who have lost their jobs or their loved ones, volunteers on boards of regents and volunteers in the Sunday schools, pediatric surgeons and coronary care nursing assistants, artisans and artists, electrical engineers and journalists, accountants and mechanics, designers and builders, grandparents, moms and dads. All of us, when we are at our best, reflect the light of our Augsburg teachers. It is unfair to name only some teachers because I did not have the opportunity to study under other wonderful professors. But my remarks today would not be complete if I did not identify the proper objects of this poetry. What a thrill it was to study political science under Professors Norma Noonan and Miles Stenchel. What a joy to study history under Professors Carl Krislock, Orlu Giselquist, Donald Gustafson, Magni Olson, and when he came graciously over from Luther Seminary to present a scholarly paper on Martin Luther to some impressionable young people, Dr. Charles Anderson. What a challenge it was to study English under Professors Ann Peterson and Gracia Christensen, and to explore sociology and economics with Professors Joel Torstenson, Leo Vetvik, and Diana Smits. What a pleasure to study religion under Professors Mario Colaci, Orland Monsager, Philip Quanbeck, Paul Sunak, and on those too few occasions when I would visit him in his home, Dr. Bernard Christensen. What a treat to study music under Professors Stephen Gabrielson, Leland Saturn, and Mayo Savold. To study the sciences under Professors Cortland Augrey, John Holm, Erwin Mickelberg, Ralph Sullerud, and Erling Erdahl. Oh yes, the place blazed with the light of these women and men. It blazed. How could a student not reflect such light? How could one not shine in the presence of Dr. Oscar Anderson, the gifted leader who headed up Augsburg College during those days? The radiance of these teachers was not primarily, of course, in the things that they taught us. No, it was in who they were. It was in how they conducted themselves in exploring the world of ideas. It was in their character. And from everything that I've heard, Augsburg is still a special place today. Still a place where students from all over the world can come to bask in the light of their teachers. So we praise and celebrate today our teachers, the heart and soul of Augsburg past and Augsburg present. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the light that you have shed and continue to shed on us. But is it possible that these women and men in turn would also find our poetry misdirected? Would they insist that the light is not their light and that they too are merely reflections of the true light? From what I remember of my teachers, I have to believe that such might be the case. For the light poured out on us in our student days at Augsburg originated from beyond our teachers. That light was conveyed to our teachers by their teachers' teachers, after being acquired from earlier teachers, and ultimately from the source of the light that first dawned on Eden. But of course, here the metaphor breaks down. For when I see my Augsburg teachers at their podiums and at their lecterns, I do not see the monochrome colors of the moon. Oh no, our teachers were much more like diamonds, refracting light and scattering a dazzling variety of colors on those of us who were lucky enough to walk in their presence. Moreover, like all gems, each teacher was different. That difference accounts for the richness that was Augsburg then. That difference surely still accounts for the richness that is Augsburg today. Today, almost 25 years away from the Augsburg experience, in my mind's eye, I'm still the 10-year-old boy of 1957, looking down the polished corridor of Science Hall while his father picks up the mail. As that child, I think of what my mother and father, the greatest of all my teachers, might give me as words to live by. Maybe words not just for me, but words for all Augsburg alums and for students who will be Augsburg alums. Here's what they might say. Take your best teachers and reflect them all your lives. Who knows? If you do that, someone, somewhere, someday may write poetry about you. But even if that happens, especially if that happens, remember who you are.
Now may the God of hope fill us with all joy and peace, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit we may abound in hope. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.